Hi, this is Linda Forsythe, and you are listening to Awaken Nation.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Zales, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things. Welcome to Awakened Nation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Awakened Nation. I have a great guest on today, Linda Forsythe. Linda, how's it going out there?
Well, outstanding. How are you?
Good. I've been dying to get you on the show, and I think my listeners are just going to enjoy the heck out of this because you are not only a patriot, you're somebody who couldn't stand on the sidelines anymore. You stood up and you said, you know what? I'm going to start my own news network. Who does that?
Somebody who's pissed off.
Do you know how many businesses get started because somebody's angry? Netflix got started out angry. He took his VHS tape back, The Right Stuff, and they charged him $40 in late fees. And he just decided, you know what? That's it. So let me read your bio because this is exciting. And I'm blown away that you did this so quickly. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the news media. We're going to talk about what news we aren't getting. And so let's kick it off. Linda Forsythe is the founder and creator of the CVine International News Network. What started out as a grassroots movement between patriot friends has caught fire and exploded in a virulent manner globally. CVine News has been placed in a charitable trust as a foundation for patriots around the world who have banded together to take charge of the news they receive. Now up to 45,000, do you hear that? 45,000 active volunteers are on assignment to investigate, vet, write news releases, and film breaking news stories from around the world. Many act as digital soldiers who help the news to spread on social media that has managed to beat the conservative news censorship. They also send a representative each month to cover the 9/11 KSM et al. Military Tribunals live from Gitmo via CCTV from Fort Meade in Maryland. Please welcome to the show, Linda Forsythe.
Thank you. That great introduction.
So Linda, I want to kick it off for our listeners because we have unusual guests on the show, and we really want to know why a lot of times people get started with this. What made you want to start CVine News Network?
Well, I don't know how many people have known me before, but I was the founder of Mentors Magazine, and had worked for a long time with Dan Kennedy and a lot of individuals doing magazine cover story interviews, getting to know about them and their histories. And I guess I became disillusioned with that after a while. A lot of things happened along with the economy. And so in answer to your question, I pretty much floundered after that of not knowing, what I was going to do. I remember praying, Lord, you gave me, incredible amount of network, a Rolodex of people to know. You taught me how to speak on stage. You taught me all of this. What am I going to do with it? It's like I couldn't even get a job at Walmart. What you used to do? Well,
Yeah, it's hard. Overqualified. That's what you're going to hear.
It was, I don't know. It was just really a troubling time for me. And so in answer to your question, I had more than enough time to pay attention to what was going on in the news. And one of the things I had done in Mentors Magazine is I had done a live interview with Donald Trump in 2006, pretty close to when he first got married to Melania. And so while we weren't close working associates, I worked with him a fair amount of times. And so I knew him enough about, what his personality was and so on. And when I heard that he was running for president, I'm answering your question. I remember thinking that if anybody can fix this country, he could. And that was my thinking. And then a bunch of information came out that I personally knew was not true. And I saw a whole lot of people, frankly, trying to take him down, plus other news that was out there. A lot of other news that was out there just was not hitting the high bar of news reporting that there used to be. And so watching this happen, to make a very long story short, I remembered back, not remember back because I wasn't there, but I remember reading in the history of, the American Revolution about why people came to America. And that was to take charge of their lives and how they all banded together to pretty much put together our country. It wasn't put together by, the royalty. We fought against that. As I was watching the news media, and since I was for the most part in a type of media myself, I knew pretty much how it worked. And I knew how easy it would be by people that are advertisers that pay you, pretty much have rule over you about what you say and what you do and who you present or how you present, just the whole gamut. They can take charge. And that's just one of the things, especially when we found out there was just a very small amount of people that owned, I think of like 6 of the major news agencies are all within one very small group of people.
There were 26 news agencies when I was a kid, from small, medium to large, and now we used to have 9, now we're down to 6, and they're all owned by the same people.
That's exactly correct. And then I was told about a book written by Saul Alinsky, which is called, oh my gosh, I'm throwing a blank, Rules for Radicals.
Yes.
And it was something that was, it was a thesis that was conducted by Hillary Clinton when she was going to get her master's degree. And it also was very closely read and followed by Obama and a number of people. And when I read it, it was mind-blowing because it named out all the rules of what you want to do when you want to take over a country. You do certain steps in place gradually.
Yeah.
And as I read that and knew that this was literally Hillary Clinton's mentor, Saul Alinsky was, I was seeing, in my opinion, a coup that was happening of somebody coming together to take over our country away from us, silently and subtly. So people didn't pick up on it right away. I saw it right away. That's why I started CVine. And it wasn't to own a news agency. Nobody owns CVine. Nobody. Mm-hmm. And nobody ever will. It's put together in a trust account for we the people. Nice. And it is run by we the people. Exactly the way this country was started when we put together the Constitution. For whatever reason, they didn't do that with the news. And so I wanted to create something that could never again be hijacked or taken over in any way, shape, or form ever again. And information that we, the people, were in charge of making certain that what was put out there was truthful, with transparency and factual. And so amazingly, what started out as just a couple of people coming together, where we would do our own research and vet the news that was out there on our own. We got more and more people coming together, and that's how it started. And now it's actually grown globally. It was blowing my mind. People are just volunteering their time. There is nobody getting paid.
This is astounding. What started out as just this great idea A grassroots effort has grown globally. I take my hat off to you. I commend you. Do you remember when Twitter, it was called Twitter's Moment? There was a hostage situation. I forget where it was, what country, but this was the beginning and the power of citizen journalism. And what happened is somebody who was a hostage, who was trying to hide from these terrorists that took over this hotel, he was texting on his Twitter account from in the belly of this place. And it really made, you have to realize, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, information, they tried to centralize it for so many years, so many centuries. Any country that wants to control the narrative has to do so from the top down. Well, Twitter destroyed that immediately with citizen journalism, where people were on the scene first, giving their assessment of what was actually happening, rather than the news coming in and starting to create a narrative, and a lot of times a false narrative, and interviewing people that, quite frankly, if you've ever, it's like there's an old joke, aliens never pick up the smartest guy from MIT. They always get the guy who's
never heard that one. That's good.
You wouldn't believe what I saw, and so this was a coup by citizens all over the world. And you set up this, you don't just let anybody report. They have to have, there's a set of standards. And I've seen you kick news articles off the Facebook page because people just put something up. Hey, and you kick it off because it hasn't been vetted, it hasn't been researched, and it's not coming from a proper source. And that's what I love about you. You are diligent about that.
You noticed that, huh? I wrote that.
Yes, I have, and I'm happy that you do it. That way we keep conspiracy theories off the board, and we just deal with facts.
That's right. That's exactly it. And we weren't really popular there for a little bit when we made the rule that you come here, you can comment and discuss respectfully until the cows come home about the subject that's written about, because it has been vetted and it's been truthful, but don't go posting your own stuff. In fact, we block people from do that, and then people try to sneak it in the comments. And so we've got quite a group of admins and mods that are very diligent about stopping that.
Well, you have to. We had Michael Howell on our show, and he wrote The Anatomy of a Global Agenda, and he said, this is not a conspiracy theory book. And I asked him, well, why? He goes, all I did was pick up Bill and Hillary Clinton's books. I picked up George Soros's books. I picked up Rockefeller's books, and I reported exactly what they said. And unfortunately, it falls into this category where people are like, oh, I can't believe that. Well, that's their words, not mine. Okay. Yeah. So that's what you do. You find the truth and you report it raw. And I love that about you.
Well, thank you. What's really surprising me, and I mentioned this to you earlier, is we have a lot of retired law enforcement helping us with investigating the news that have a history, a background in investigations. In fact, my business partner, Leonard Bacani, is a retired police officer, and he's now has his own private investigations firm. But he's a volunteer too. I mean, none of us are getting paid.
Wait, I hate to say it, but in this day and age, I always say follow the money. And so the story, like today's story, Joe Biden was caught doing bad stuff when he was vice president and making sure his son got $1 billion in a retirement account. That means it's taxed. It isn't taxed. And the news immediately, instead of investigating Joe Biden, the news decided to go after Donald Trump because he asked for the investigation. And I don't care if you're liberal or you're conservative, you would have to at some point realize the news is playing us. The mainstream news is playing a game with us because they need to sensationalize the news now. They need to attack and just have conjecture. And when you see that they're actually taking Adam Schiff seriously when he has been proven to be a liar over and over again, where do you get your news? I mean, where do you get real news? And a lot of Americans don't even know what real news is. Where do you think that shift took place? I I think it was back in the 80s when Maury Povich and all these other shows came on and sensationalized news. I think that's when it began, this destruction of real news.
Well, that's for sure. I'm just kind of curious how many people that are listening right now understand what Guantanamo Bay is in Cuba, what Gitmo is, what's really going on there, and what's happening, because it has been blowing my mind how many people are completely clueless.
If I didn't know you, I wouldn't know any of this is happening. And ladies and gentlemen, we talked about this in your bio, Linda. They're doing military tribunals over the 9/11, things that took place, and they're doing it down in Gitmo, and they're not letting the mainstream news in because they know the mainstream news is going to muck it up, and they're going to tell lies. They're presenting evidence. They're going over the papers. They're going over the transcripts every day, and you are at the forefront of this. I want you to talk about this because a lot of people still believe the narrative, the official story that was put out about 9/11. And you don't have to be a demolition expert to understand that, well, maybe there's something there. And if you're somebody who's now getting upset and you're a truther, no, we just want to look at the facts. We want to look at the evidence, and then you make your assessment from there. And tell us a little bit about how this started and what's going on, and how did you get carte blanche to get down there?
I'm still trying to figure that one out because I'm nobody. I mean, right. I don't have any history in filming. I know all about publishing, right? But doing YouTube and reporting the news. Actually, Leonard Bacani, my business partner, saw a press release from the Department of Defense looking for alternative news to go ahead and apply to cover the news in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba for the tribunals. And it's like, whoa. So myself and a number of other volunteers, we applied and let them know who we were, and they really looked into our background and so on. And I don't know how many other people applied. I don't know the situation, but we were told at that time, because there are two different ways you can go. You can actually be in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba to be able to cover the news, or you can go to these proverbial outposts and military bases. There's only a couple of them that will CCTV live stream the actual proceedings as they happen with a 40-second delay, just like they do in Guantanamo, directly into a viewing room for media and also the general public. A lot of people don't know that. But we didn't make the cut to go to Guantanamo Bay. But a gentleman I became very good friends with now, his name is Ron Fleisvig. He's basically the head of media with Guantanamo Bay. He said, well, you can go to Fort Meade in Maryland, and you can go ahead and report from there. And
there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. And nobody was there.
You're kidding.
We were the only ones in the room, and occasionally other people would come in. There would maybe each time, when I say we, at first it was Leonard Bacani and I, would be the only ones in the room viewing it, or besides maybe about 4 or 5 other people, depending upon the day. And the Department of Defense, on their website, they're not hiding this. Huh. It's all over, the days, the calendar. They go ahead and they post the transcripts on the proceedings. And it goes way, way back. So, nobody knows about this. Why? Because mainstream media doesn't bring it up. Now, there's some things, if you are interested, that for those of you that don't know about this, there are some things I think they should be aware of. Or would you rather just ask me the questions? And
No, let's dig in. If you want to take a deep dive, I'm all for it. So this fascinates me that I have a theory, and that theory is people think they're activists on Instagram and Facebook and all these places. And I say, no, you've been sequestered into the digital world in a bubble. So Washington can do whatever the hell they want. And nobody knows because we don't have the traditional face-to-face way of protesting. So people are actually sequestered in a bubble and they're not getting their news. And yes, let's take a deep dive about what you're discovering at these tribunals.
Well, first off, I need to correct one thing. While in the very beginning there, for quite a few months, for the most part, CVine was the only one that was covering these and putting it on the news.
Right.
There is a lady who was working for the Miami Herald that now works for the New York Times and is starting to post on her personal page on Twitter on some of the goings on.
Yes.
So that is something. But the New York Times does occasionally put out some articles, and she is good. I have to give credit where credit is due.
Right.
But for the most part, I mean, that it was just us and now her, as far as I'm aware of. But let's get down to the nitty gritty of this. Today's what? It's 2019. This happened.
And before you jump in, I want everybody to know what Linda is about to tell you is not speculation. This is from the transcripts of the trials. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that is very true. Everything I tell you can be backed up. And I highly, in fact, encourage you to please fact check me.
Yes.
Okay. We all know when 9/11 happened, 2001. It is now, October 2019. These are still 18 years later in the pre-trial stage. Do you know that?
Wow.
18 years.
Right.
You have to understand briefly what happened. So I'm going to be really just glossing over a lot of things and just giving highlights because there's a lot.
Good.
The first couple of years after that, it was a matter of searching these people out. And they knew who it was because we found out, and it is on the transcripts that this is factual, that 6 months before 9/11 happened, from April 2001 to October 2001, the FBI was listening in on chatter, phone calls, going on of all the people that were planning 9/11. So they knew the when, the how, the who, which has been found out by a linguist, especially how many years later. We know everything, and they knew then what was coming down the pike. That little bit of information in and of itself blew me away. Now, They were saying, oh, it was an accident. We just thought it was just chatter. Well, we're talking 6 months of chatter. 250 calls over, I believe it was 51 different lines. I don't know if those are the exact number, but it's close. Things that had gone on over time. They know each person, and there was an institution that was represented on there. But this has always been kept under wraps.
Yes.
Right after 9/11 happened, President Bush at the time changed some of the tribunal rules. This is a fact.
Oh.
Okay. And there were quite a few law schools and law students that were writing articles that, this is really going to be a problem if you continue to do this and so on. But, nobody was listening to them. They were just thinking he's doing whatever he's got to do. part of the problem at that time was he gave judges the right to close the proceeding at any time they wanted for any reason. It was unilaterally the judge's decision. So a whole lot of the proceedings were closed for security reasons.
Wow.
So transparency was taken off the table completely. Very few other people knew about this. They caught, he's nicknamed KSM, but it stands for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, right, who was supposedly the mastermind behind all this. And then there are 4 others also that had varying degrees of responsibility. So it's called, the tribunals are called the KSM et al., which means and the others. And all 5 are being tried at once.
Wow.
Okay, which is interesting. KSM, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was caught in 2003. And there's al-Bashiri, and there's a number of others in there. But during that period of time of whoever was caught, these alleged terrorists were put into what they call black sites, where they did enhanced interrogation, which basically is torture. I believe it was up until the year 2006. And then they started the pre-trials. After about 7 years of pre-trials, a new ruling came out by Obama that said you cannot take any of the confessions that have been gained under torture or enhanced interrogation from the black sites. So they threw everything out. They had to. Everything was thrown out of court. And they started something new a couple years later where they have clean teams. This is what they're called, which is basically the FBI comes in and they're nice to them. And I'm sorry, I don't know how else to put
Hey,
this,
buddy.
but,
Hey, buddy. How's it going? You want coffee? What else would you like? Yeah.
Exaggerating. They have to voluntarily give the information, because anything that is gleaned from them that is against their will, no matter what methods are used, are illegal.
Yeah.
And so everything else was thrown out of court. But the thing is, these guys have no problem of admitting they're doing it. In fact, one thing that ran my blood cold was during these last proceedings, I'll go into more detail in a minute, was where they were explaining when they were caught. Every single one of them was gleefully bragging the amount of deaths that they caused, the misery, how they're going to, go to heaven with all their little virgins waiting for them. And, the whole thing, they were looking to be put to death. In fact, they were rather upset that, it wasn't as swift as maybe of what they were imagining it would be.
Yeah.
So that was actually one of the complaints. And there were some statements made that I'm just going to have you guys go through the transcripts and go through the many, many, many reports that CVine has done on our c-vine.com page. Up at the top, there's a taskbar, and one of them says Military Tribunals. So on the whole page, we have breaking news of all different types, but we specialize in the military tribunals. We send a representative there every single time to actually physically be there at Fort Meade to watch the tribunals coming in from Guantanamo Bay live with a 40-second delay and reporting on it. Wow. And so we can see the expressions and of the alleged terrorists who are there in the courtroom, and that's not something you can see on a transcript.
No.
But so we report on that. The thing is, and I am getting too close to the end part of this, is when the pretrials started again in 2012, we're now going on about 7 years again. And there have been some circumstances that have gone on, let's just say it's complicated, that I did a report and I really was hesitant about doing so because it was just such a soul-killing bit of information, until it finally got to the point of this past 9/11. I decided, okay, September 11th, I'm letting it out. And so I did a report that I can make available to you guys that basically said, this is never going to trial. It can't. It has been weaponized by the type of laws that have been put into place, that things just go round and round and round. The trial that never ends, that have never even gotten to trial. It's going on to 7 years. The thing is, the new judge, because there's new judges coming in and out of these things constantly, the last new judge is taking the proverbial bull by the horns, and he did post a trial date, very first time after all these years. And it's going to be on January 11th, 2021. So it's not this coming year, but the year after that is when the trial will start. But it still wasn't going to go to trial. And let me explain to you why. They don't have to worry about, getting confessions from these alleged terrorists, because they pretty much have confessed. But it's all the other shenanigans that are going on that is what is going to probably cause this to be tossed out of court. Just to give you one small example, one of the, what they call witnesses from the CIA that was there during the enhanced interrogations in the beginning with al-Baluchi and Nashiri and all the others that were in there, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Now they have witnesses that listen to all of this.
Right.
So one of the witnesses, after so many years, retired because a lot of time has gone by. Well, guess what happened?
What?
In court, it was a closed proceeding for a long, long time. Whenever these witnesses would come on, that nobody else could see it. The other terrorist recognized the linguist that was sitting next to Nashiri. It was that CIA witness that was there during the interrogations, had gotten a job on the defense team. Now that just one little thing right there.
This is crazy. You're telling me from, two presidents passing laws that kind of sabotage the ability to get the information out of people. This sounds like a circus of errors. Like they just don't want the truth to get out. They don't want the details to get out. They're just dragging it on and on and on.
Well, that's self-evident. And the thing is, this isn't just rumor. I have physically, personally watched it. Now, There's one thing I need to bring up. I found out about how this was never going to go to a trial by this wonderful little elderly gentleman that would be there on the first day of the tribunals only with his wife. He was quite elderly. And he bragged to Leonard Bacani the first time, and then the next month later to me, separate times. They didn't know that we knew each other. And then a third time to one of our other volunteers on a different month, and a fourth time to someone else. He was bragging that he was the son of the lead defense attorney for KSM. I mean, his son was a lead defense attorney, which is fine. I mean, he was proud of his son. And so he has all this information about what's happening, about what his son tells him. And one of the things he said to each of us was, this will never go to trial. It can't. So I didn't understand it at first, but as I got into it over time, I could see now what's happening. But there is good news. The victims and family members of the victims have been soliciting and taking to court and suing anyone and everyone they can to get the names released that were recorded, not only on, during September. I mean, this shouldn't even be a thing. Get the names released. In other words, have them unclassified, declassified.
Yeah.
And then plus in 2012, during a federal court hearing, there was, during a closed proceeding, a name was redacted out of a very important Saudi official that was proven to be the main instigator behind this, but plus a whole lot more. And they have sued and sued and sued, and they've gone through court after court after court, and was turned down not this last month, but the month before, for the very first time in Guantanamo Bay. None of the victims and family members were there in Guantanamo, because they always have a space for them to be able to watch the trials.
Right. No one showed.
Because they knew what was going on. It's like, this is ridiculous, and they had been turned down again. So this is why it went to Barr. So I don't know how many people are even aware of this, but A.G. Barr was given the responsibility of deciding by September 12th of this year of whether or not he was going to declassify that name or if he was going to keep it classified. So that's why I decided on September 11th, the day before, I was going to spill the beans on everything I heard, people that said it, situations, everything backing up what I'm saying with fact. This is what's happening, and just let Barr go ahead and keep his mouth shut. Because the American people, it was the scariest thing I ever had to do, Brad. You have no idea.
I can only imagine. Wow.
Nobody is saying this, and here I am. Who am I? I'm just a little citizen journalist that doesn't even really totally understand how to do journalism yet. And, to come out and put out this information, I mean, my first video was sideways. I couldn't get it. So I did it, and I was determined. And sure enough, Barr did come up with a decision, and he declassified it up to a point. And what he basically said was, I will declassify the name and give it to the attorneys of the defense team, because they didn't, even know what the information was, even though, the terrorists, I'm sure, do. But they didn't know what the names were. And giving it to the attorneys of the victims and family members that's representing them to them, and giving it to representatives of Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
So, meaning the attorneys. Now, getting this out there before this last time that I went, because it actually went through September 11th, and I heard some things that hit me to my core of some testimony that was going on. But up until September 11th, there were still games being played, in my opinion. Delays, just all this other stuff being going on. That was another reason why I released it. Then they found out Barr what they were going to do. And so they had an emergency closure, because this last month it was on for 3 weeks solid. That's the first time ever that they've done this, even through the weekends. On September 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th, they closed it for national security reasons, to figure out how they were going to move forward with these trials. Well, that Monday was open proceedings, and there was a difference between night and day.
How so?
All this stuff is coming out.
Wow.
All this stuff that the CIA just absolutely refused to declassify, and so on. Now, it isn't coming out in one great big data dump. It's coming out, in a little bit each day during the proceedings.
Right.
and there's a whole lot more that was coming out, but they went through a lot of the testimony, even because these are pre-trials, they can bring up at least what was talked about before. So we heard that. It's not admissible in court as it stands right now, but we heard that, and this is what just hit me to my core, and it's all in the transcripts. It's not redacted out.
Right.
They had the CIA witnesses there in open court. That's the first time in 18 years, because it's always been in closed court.
Right.
Nobody could see it. There a whole lot is coming out, and that's about as abbreviated as I can give you. And that's still not even touching on what is going on. But I am going to give you a hint, and this is just from an educated guess, and this is not fact. This is an educated guess.
Perfect.
It isn't just the conspiracy theories of possibilities of who could have been doing it within our own government. There's some pretty significant, interesting things coming out, how the UN and a number of other things besides Saudi officials, this was a great big planned situation. This one name that's coming out now, they know what's coming. That's why they're suddenly being transparent. It's going to be the first domino to fall. And after that falls, it's going to around the world. And so the first thing I keep hearing people say is, well, when is Bush going to Gitmo? Or when is this, and all, what's going to happen to Hillary? It's like, you guys, that's another thing I want to make clear. People don't seem to understand that Guantanamo Bay was set up because of, for the most part, because of 9/11. And it's for Al-Qaeda. There are 40 people right now in Guantanamo Bay. All of them are Al-Qaeda. Americans cannot be detained or tried in Guantanamo Bay. They can have military tribunals if there's treason.
Wow.
But Gitmo isn't an end-all dumping ground for treason and doing things. You cannot be an American unless, if you are an American, you have to have direct ties to Al-Qaeda.
Huh.
So a lot of people don't know that, and I'm hearing all these conspiracy theories of, well, why don't they send this American there? It's like,
yeah, you can't.
Right. And there's a lot more to this. That's, again, just a thumbnail sketch.
Well,
people aren't aware.
I've always pointed out to people, and Richard Maybury says this, he's a geopolitical analyst. He says, our laws end at our borders. So sometimes they will do something overseas or offshore because there's no laws. So the only way to control and protect or do whatever, it's very interesting that you brought this up, that they can do a tribunal there, but they can't try an American under normal law.
Not in Guantanamo. They have, think of the Oklahoma City bomber. That was an American. Did he go to Gitmo? He had a military tribunal. Where was he tried? So for whatever reason, and I don't know if it was just a rumor that just kind of took off and went viral or what happened, but Americans have been tried for treason since our country began, since the revolution.
Oh, yeah.
And, military tribunals of all different types. So the Gitmo is not the end all.
No.
Where people are going.
Yeah, I think it was Alexander Hamilton. I think it was 9 or 12 farmers they rounded up, and they were going to hang them because they were making their own whiskey. And the government wanted, it's called the Great Whiskey Rebellion. Look it up. And I think it was Jefferson that pardoned them because Hamilton wanted to use them as an example. So yeah, the treason going against the federal government, that has been around since the beginning of our country. So.
Wasn't it? It's interesting you say that. I saw a TV show not too long ago that it was the IRS agents or something to this effect that were the ones that were hunting the whiskey runners down, basically because they were taking their taxes.
Well, that's here's what happened. People don't know this. Back during when Prohibition started, people don't realize this, but the only way the federal government could really get money, because the IRS was very new, they got their money from tobacco, alcohol, and firearms sales. So it's a consumption tax. The IRS was brand new, and it took them about 2 years to go after your revenue. Your revenue. And back then, your taxes were 1%. Okay. So they had this newly formed group called the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and they had no crimes to solve. There was no crime. So suddenly Prohibition is enacted. And by the way, you may not know this, 60% of our government's revenue came from alcohol sales. Why would you cut that off? Why would you end your financial stream because 10% of the population were teetotalers and they were complaining? Well, I believe there were two things. They wound up making more money, making it illegal, because now they had a steady stream of individuals through the court system, and they have to pay fines to get out, or they have to go to jail. And the second thing is, and you see this in the Untouchables story, the Untouchable movie and all this, the FBI was given teeth. And so they ran around and were killing people and shooting people and arresting them because they couldn't make any money. Remember, this was the Great Depression as well. So people looked to make, alcohol is a drug. So guess what? They became drug dealers. And that was the beginning of this passing a law just so we can create revenue and create jobs and create stuff and all this. So you don't have to look very far to understand how this works. And near the end of Prohibition,
changed?
Yeah, nothing has changed. And near the end, and by the way, I'm not anti-government. I'm just questioning the historical facts of the past that all governments go through. They can't just sit back and let citizens live their life. And near the end of Prohibition, our government actually poisoned alcohol to kill people, and mark them up so that they could identify, oh, you drank whiskey, we're going to arrest you now. And there was a disease that came from that. So you don't have to look very far before you lose trust. That's all I have to say.
It's still the bottom line, Brad. Follow the money. That's, I hate to say it. If you remember the day before 9/11.
On September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld came on television, and this was on TV, and he said the Pentagon is missing $3 trillion. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, and the next day, this all happened, and hitting part of the Pentagon where the records were kept, but I'm not even going to get into that. There is a lot that's going to be coming to light, folks. It's going to be very hard for some people to hear. But it's coming to light, and there's been a lot of investigations and things going on for quite some time, and it's starting to come out now. Yeah. And it's going to be very hard to hear.
It is. Donald Rumsfeld came on television September 10th, 2001, and said emphatically that $3 trillion was missing. The Pentagon lost it somehow. And he was going to investigate and audit this. And the next day, 9/11 happened, and his office was targeted. He was lucky to be on the opposite side of the building that day, and his office was the one that was hit. Where that big gaping hole is, that's where Donald Rumsfeld's office was. Mm. The other thing is, I lived in New York City on the day of 9/11, and for some reason I could not get to sleep the night before. Tossed and turned. And my wife, Norma, at the time, she got up and she says, I'm going to go to Connecticut because we had some friends that were working on a project and we wanted to help. And I was so exhausted. I said, I can't go. She insisted. She goes, I have a feeling we just need to get out of Manhattan today. I said, no, I'm just going to stay here. She left. An hour later, I heard this over our apartment. And I was in bed, and it's, it was like, what, 8 something in the morning, 8:30. And I go, what the hell was that? Because you're not allowed to fly over Manhattan. And I was on 13th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. That was where my apartment was. I went out into the street, and I saw the World Trade Towers. The first one was smoke coming out of it, and thousands of people lined up on 6th Avenue staring at this thing. And, I took pictures of it, with a camera. We didn't have, our phones didn't have, cameras at that time. And then when the second plane hit, I thought, this is crazy. And what happened is they shut Manhattan down from 14th Street down to World Trade Towers. At night, it was pitch black. No businesses were open. I'm a Manhattan guy, so I couldn't find places to eat. Now, for the way my apartment was set up, I had a HEPA air conditioner filter. It was a really good air conditioner, and I kept the windows shut and everything. And about 4 days later, the wind shifted, and you could smell it in my neighborhood, this toxic smell of burned concrete and bodies. I mean, I can't describe the smell. And my wife, she says, you got to get the hell out of Manhattan and come to Long Island. So I did. And I went to Long Island for 2 weeks. When I came back, and I had let my air conditioner run that whole time, because it was unseasonably warm. It always is in Manhattan at those time of year. So it would come on and go off. When I got back to the apartment, I took the filter out, and it was jet black. Jet black, that filter. And I replaced it. So the stuff that was in the air, and for 3 days it was all the smoke and everything was blowing into Brooklyn and Queens. And all of a sudden it shifted on that fourth day, and it was heading north. The wind was blowing everything up to us. I'm glad I got out of Manhattan because I'd probably have lung problems at this point.
A lot of people do.
But there's something that a lot of people ignore. They don't want to talk about this. They believe in the official story, but 3 buildings came down that day. 2 were hit by a plane, and the third was not hit by a plane. They try to say, well, it got, fuel on it. No, it didn't. That was Building 7. And Building 7 held all the IRS records for every corporation in America. And if you know, we were heading into a financial meltdown back then. George Bush actually came out around, I think it was December. He said, no corporation can, use 9/11 as an excuse, because they started to notice they were getting ready to file, and they were getting ready to do their fourth quarter reports, and they were all blaming 9/11 for their business fall off. And a lot of times that was true. But you have to realize, how did they bring down Building 7? And everybody forgets the fire department was there, and the fire department said pull, and they blew it up. And you may want to argue this, but do you know how long it takes to set up a demolition of a building? So let's just say the World Trade Towers came down with the jets. Okay, let's just say that's what that happened. Building 7 is the mystery. It is the flaming, smoking gun. Yeah. Why did they bring that building down? It was not on fire. There was nothing wrong with it. Why did they bring it down? They say that it was structurally bad or whatever. And then to pull, and you have to realize, when you demolish something, you have to set the charges properly. That takes months. Mm-hmm. And by the time those charges hit, the building is blown up in a way that everything falls in on itself. So that had to be calculated mathematically. That had to be set up a certain way. And all of a sudden, just give us the facts, please, because as far as I'm concerned, that's the canary in the coal mine. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you blow up that third building, which is down the block? And we know it contains all the IRS records for all the corporations in the United States. And there were some corporations that were up on some pretty sleazy charges at that time. Yeah. Was it Enron and WorldCom? The record's gone. gone. And the only way you can get out of an IRS audit is if there's a catastrophe that destroyed your records.
How about that?
Lucky. Yeah. So,
it had to, in my personal opinion, it had to have been demolition. I mean, I'm not from New York, but it was about, I don't know, 3 years after 9/11 happened. And I was visiting there, and they still were cleaning up.
Yeah.
And I was across the street. This is when I was doing Mentors Magazine. I was across the street on the corner, across the street from the two World Trade Centers where this happened. There was a little cafe, drugstore cafe.
Right.
And the owner of it was there, and it was that cafe that they were going to use as like a medical depot for,
I know which one. I know which one you were talking about. Yeah, I've been there.
So I was at that cafe, and I was talking to the owner. I told him I'm from Mentors Magazine, which I was at the time, and you just ask him a bunch of questions. And I sat there spellbound by what he was telling me. New York streets, I mean, California, the streets are like really wide.
Right, exactly.
But New York streets I was shocked that it wasn't very wide.
No.
It wasn't any wider than, in my opinion, like a neighborhood street here. It was not that wide.
But on either side, there's high rises and big buildings. And
all around it.
And the odd part is when you get down there, there are still buildings that are from the 1800s down there, brick buildings that are apartment buildings now.
That's right.
It's a very strange dichotomy that happens down there.
There's an old church that also is across the street that has been there very close since
the 1600s. Yeah,
right.
Trinity Church.
So this huge monster, two buildings come down exactly into their footprint.
Yeah,
and the only, I mean, they. I thought,
sense.
Can you imagine being at that cafe and, oh my gosh, but went down so perfectly right into the footprint. And then you're saying, building 7, which wasn't even hit, wasn't on fire. It goes down. It's something isn't right. And most people do suspect that now, although I have a couple people telling me, no conspiracy theories. Well, if you have been listening to some of the things that I have and have facts to back it up.
Well, we just gave a fact. Building 7 was demolished through demolition. They say it. It ain't a conspiracy theory. And the fire department and the police department were arguing over who should pull it and when to pull it. That's on the walkie-talkies. So we're not talking conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory is when you start to go, oh, this is planned so they could bring about the new world order. That's conspiracy theory. Let's just go with the facts and let them lead where they need to lead. And, I lived in Manhattan at that time. It was just incredible. And it took about 2 weeks. And whenever you walked around downtown, nobody joked, nobody laughed. Everybody was serious. And then one day, a cabbie told me off, just yelled at me. And I turned and looked at a friend. And I said, we're back. We're New Yorkers.
Somebody has to keep you in line. But it's glad that well, I know what you're saying, though. I was saying that teasingly. Yeah. But I know what you're saying because while I was there in front of that cafe, a fire truck went down the street, engines blaring, and there was a couple of them right in a row.
Right.
And I'll never forget the look, because the streets, again, aren't that big.
Right.
When they went by, the look on every single fireman's face as they went by and just looked, and it was just an indescribable look of...
Well, I want to just say God bless the first responders and the people who went down there. I have stories that other people don't have because I have friends who are nurses, psychologists, police, and firefighters. And there's a story they didn't tell you. They found bodies over those months. And the toughest part, and God bless the people who worked on this, You have a heart of gold for doing this kind of work, but the rats were fighting to pull the bodies back. They had to have 5-10 people pull people out of the wreckage. That's how bad it was. I also have friends who are psychologists. They would sit with me and say, Brad, these firefighters have gag orders on them. They're not allowed to talk to the press or anybody. And they come to me crying and bawling because they have stories that are not part of the official narrative, because they're telling me something that should scare the hell out of every American. And if you notice, whenever they do documentaries, they don't interview New Yorkers who were there that day. They always get an official person to sit and give the proper narrative. You know, Jerry Silverstein, it's very funny, on a documentary, probably right after the World Trade Towers were built. He's the owner of the World Trade Towers, or was. I don't know if he still is. He said this building has been built to withstand a 747 striking it from the outside. He actually said that back when the World Trade Towers were built. Wow. Yeah, even Donald Trump, I think, was in that documentary, so talking about how great it was built. And I'm not saying what is or what isn't, or what happened, or who did it, or who done it, as they say. I'm just saying, please, can we look at the facts and stop speculating? You know, this has become like the JFK assassination. They put out as many possible stories as they possibly can, so you can't figure out what the truth is. And now we're getting to the truth at the tribunal.
In fact, even though each day of a tribunal puts out around 200 pages of transcript,
that's amazing.
This last month, where I said there was 3 weeks, this was an eye-opener more than usual. And I highly recommend you take the time and read through some of these things. When I hear stories like yours, Brad, on what was going on to the victims and what happened, and this one thing just keeps going on through my mind of what one of the alleged terrorists said, gleefully bragging
yeah.
about, you know, what they did, and spoke openly.
Yeah.
Something has gone. What is actually a fact? I guess I'm backing up what you're saying. You just read the transcripts, even though there's a lot of them there. You want to know what's going on?
I'll check it out. We'll make them available in the show notes. What has really blown my mind is, you know, I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, and I remember growing up where if you worked hard, you could buy a Corvette. You know, you might work minimum wage, 5-6 jobs, but you could make a living. And we had somebody in my hometown who bought a Corvette, and he was the freelance photographer for the Lebanon Daily News. And there wasn't such a, you know, the divide between rich and poor. Mm-hmm. And I really thought racism was coming to an end, because a lot of my friends were from all backgrounds, you know, Latino, Black, Americans, Asian, you know. We grew up in a town, a small town where, you know, it seemed that things were going well. But something crazy happened over the last 40 years. We've lost it all. This country has gone into some place that's weird. You know, I feel like I'm in an alternative reality where the word patriot now became a dirty word. How do we get a hold of you? Can you say it real quick?
To get a hold of me, well, first off, go to the website, c-fine.com, and that has everything. Look up at the taskbar at the top. And also we have a Facebook page that you can go on there. It's a Facebook group.
Yes.
And that actually is something that is wonderful to be a part of. And that is called, well, it's the CVine, C-Fine International News Network. And I don't see the address on here, but looking that up, C-Fine International News Network, the Facebook
Excellent.
group, we've got 18,000 people in there right now, volunteers, and members discussing the news that's posted, which is always vetted. And then we have a YouTube page, which is also C-Vine News Network, that we do reports on the tribunals.
Right.
We're on Twitter, so
I look forward to it. We're going to put it all up on the site. I'm going to say this, but we're going to continue the show. And thank you, Linda, for being an amazing guest on this show. And I hope everybody does their research. And we're going to have you back on, definitely.
Oh, good. That sounds great. There is one thing I do request.
Sure.
Nobody is getting paid. I mentioned that before. That is the absolute truth.
Donations only, right?
Going to these tribunals, I mean, staying in hotels for many weeks, multiple people, food, not only the lodging, but airline,
right.
Everything that's involved, plus the overhead, this website, when you go to c-vine.com, you see how huge it is. It is really, really big. All these people have been donating their time to put this together.
How do we donate to you? Because I want our listeners to donate to your cause.
Well, on our website, c-vine.com, in the taskbar, there's a donations button.
Click on that.
Click on that, and it goes directly into the foundation. It's not anyone's personal account. And so it's directly into a trust account.
Please donate, my friends, because we need more citizen journalism and not corporate journalism that controls the media and says what's perfect and quirky just for the advertisers so they don't make too many waves. CVine News Network is bringing you the top stories that the mainstream news refuses to cover. And Linda Forsythe, I say, is not just a patriot, but she gives a damn about the human race and the global human race, the population. And that's why she started this. So God bless and thank you, Linda. Thank you for being on Awakened Nation.
Thank you, Brad.
You bet. So I'm going to let it continue recording. If we get some good dialogue and your computer shuts down, we'll continue for another 5 minutes. But
it's like, oh my God.
you're on a PC. That's why, right? They have a mind of their own.
I'm on a make certain it's plugged in.
On a Mac. Yeah, make sure it's plugged in. I did. You're going to crack up. I was doing an interview with Brian Smith, who founded Uggs, and I was on a landline. And I forgot to plug my phone in. I had one of those fancy Panasonic phones that you have to plug in. And all of a sudden it goes out. I had to sign back in. He was still rambling on. If you know Brian, he's from Australia. And he's like, yeah, so anyways, Brad, I went on a surfer trip, And I lost. I got out. I come back into the recording. He's still going, so back in the day. And I'm like, hey, bro. I missed half of what he said. I was going for 5 minutes, but he was still going, man. It was great.
You know how many times that's happened to me, though? I'd be on a phone call and I'm just babbling away and the person is gone.
That's good. Well, I find what you're doing exciting because I think we all kind of start doing this. We get tired of the BS and we say to ourselves, you know what? I met Donald Trump years ago. I think it was 96, 97, and around there. I was invited to the Forbes magazine 80th anniversary get together, and it was at Lincoln Center, and I got to meet Donald Trump, and I couldn't believe how tall he was.
Yeah, I know.
But what impressed the hell out of me was Steve Forbes talked with me and my wife for over 20 minutes, he and his wife, and I talk about that in my book, Liquid Leadership. And I think he would have made a great president. Remember, he was going to run for office, but
yeah, I do remember. I think I lived in Colorado at the time.
And he got chastised and attacked. And I think the reason these guys get chastised and attacked is they're not politicians. They're outsiders. Mm-hmm. They don't know there's a secret group and they're all making money. Folks, you shouldn't be asking how Donald Trump became a billionaire. You should be asking how Chuck Schumer became a multimillionaire. Nancy Pelosi became a multimillionaire because Harry Truman, one of our presidents, in case you didn't know that, Harry Truman actually said, if a politician is rich, he's crooked. And I always sit when I hear something going on in the news and I'm being told, oh, you need to buy this product, or you need to take this, or you need to stop doing that, and blah, blah. Whenever I sit there, I go, okay, where's the money going? Who gets to gain the most amount of money from this? And we have an entire generation that's actually been raised not to question anything that the government does, that they're your friend. They're here to take care of you. That is the biggest load of poppycock you've ever been taught. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you do what you're told. That's what, thinking for yourself. They only recently have started teaching a little bit about entrepreneurship, because everybody is meant to go get a job working for somebody else, go to college to get, educated to work for somebody else. Well, I want to be the person that makes the business that hires the people in college to be
right. Well, I've always said this to people. It's like, okay, when you go to a regular school, public school system, they teach you to be a cog in the wheel, to pay your taxes, shut up. They don't even teach you how to pay your taxes. They don't teach you how to get a loan and buy a house and get a mortgage. They don't teach you anything when it comes to survival tips. Now, I do believe we need to learn mathematics, reading, writing, or arithmetic, because it makes your brain form a certain way, so you become very articulate and intelligent and polished. You want to be a polished human being. And somewhere along the line, they lowered the standards. Somewhere along the line, they stopped debating and listening and teaching and talking and discussing. They took out civics. They took out social studies. They took all that out. What to do to be a good citizen? Because you may not know this, ladies and gentlemen, but there was a time when they taught you how to be a citizen of the United States. For all of us, including me, okay? I look like the whitest guy on planet Earth, when you look that up in the dictionary, white guy, okay? But I'm Hungarian and Irish and German. I'm kind of a mixed mutt. We all had to adhere to the rules of being a citizen of the United States.
Right.
And that meant you do not encroach on other people's persons or their property. And anytime you want to make a change in the law, remember, your freedom ends where mine begins. So that means I actually have to defend my neighbor's freedom. What does that mean? You may love jazz, but if you start playing it at 2 o'clock in the morning, you've encroached on my freedom. Mm-hmm. And you should know that you are disrupting the law. You are disrupting my peace. And that a logical person would say, that's wrong. We used to know what right and wrong was. We don't know what right and wrong is anymore. And they've done that on purpose. That started with all the work of Carl Rogers out on the West Coast, and then Dr. Spock. Don't paddle children. Don't tell them what the rules are. Let them find themselves. Well, when are they going to find themselves? When are they going to figure out the rules? When are they going to learn what's right and wrong? And unfortunately, they learn it the hard way. Later in life. At 30, when, here's the funny part, Linda. When I was a kid, I had a rough childhood. My mother was bipolar. My dad was kind of emotionally mean and tough. Do you know my friends call me today because they're going through emotional stuff that they can't handle? And I went through it at 10. So they're asking me, how did you do it? This is the thing we've removed from the next generation, this ability to survive, this ability to be strong, this ability to know that America changed the world. If you don't know that America changed the world, you might have been taught by somebody who has been indoctrinated into some of the modern thinking.
When you were talking about that is so true, Brad. On the CVine website, there's still an article up that's an opinion piece that was written about an interview happening with a woman by the name of Kitty Worthman, I believe her name is. And she was a child during World War II in Germany. And she was in Austria, excuse me. And she makes the statement that people think, because of watching the movie The Sound of Music, that the Germans came through the streets in tanks and, et cetera, basically took over Austria. Yeah. She goes, that's not true. We invited them in. We celebrated them coming. Yeah. We asked them to come. And she talks about how they started out in a situation of being in extreme poverty. She said that she and her mother they were Christians, and they had a little bit more money than some of the other people. And so they used to make great big, huge pots of stew, and they would feed a large number of people every single day, to be able to do this. People were starving, and they heard that in the, I don't know, it's called the next county, city, village over, whatever.
Ready.
That, Hitler, they said, came in and helped those people, and they have all the food they want. They have housing, they have clothing, they can go to school, they, have education, they have, etc. And that it was definitely worth, allowing this to happen. People were starving. That's what they were looking for. Well, and so at first she talks about how it was very welcomed, and they were dancing in the street because they no longer were hungry, and things were, big kitchens were opened, and etc. Well, the thing is, with socialism and communism, the money, some way, shape, or form, starts to run out. And once you are completely and totally 100% dependent upon your caretaker, so to speak, and that caretaker can no longer provide for you and or weaponizes what you need in order to manipulate you to do, act, or think a certain way, then suddenly they have everything they need in order to be able to create. And that is how everything happened in World War II, is people were subtly, bit by bit by bit, brought in. She makes the statement emphatically, had we known or had a clue what they were doing, we would have all been the first out there fighting this.
Yep.
It was subtle over years on how this happened.
It's like the snake in the Garden of Eden. Subtle.
That's very true.
Wonderful. Oh, listen to what they said. They're going to take care of us. They're going to give us food.
They're going to go to school for us.
Never cross.
Pay for school, and we're already the free housing, and
it never crossed your mind that the reason you wound up in poverty and the destruction economically was because they manipulated it that way. Yes. Much like they're trying to do that.
Desperate to make you hungry.
The only way you can bring an American to their knees, and by the way, we've been called arrogant when we go around the world, and what people don't realize is we're not arrogant. What we've been taught is we tell our government what to do. And when you go to Europe and places like that, the government tells them what to do. So they see us as arrogant, but in reality, we're standing up for our rights. We know our place, and that's been slowly eroded. And the only way you can bring an American to their knees is destroy them economically, because this is the land of opportunity. And the Cloward Piven strategy, the Fabian Society, all this stuff has infiltrated our society, and people don't even know that they're talking Marxism or communism when they're opening their mouth. And the reason they're talking about it is they're tired of the struggle. The economic struggle is very real in America, and that's why people are turning to socialism, because it sounds so awesome. When you hear Bernie Sanders come on, he's like, we have to take care of everyone. Everyone has to, be a part of this. We have to take care. When we hear that stuff, it sounds great if you're uneducated. It sounds great if you're struggling in a minimum wage job. It sounds awesome. But guess what? You may not realize that your nanny, the nanny state, is also your jailer.
That's the best way I've ever heard it put. That is so true. A nanny state. The nanny is your jailer. It's
G. Edward Griffin said it.
It was all orchestrated on California is an excellent example. The state I live in is they made rules and statutes and everything that make it surviving as a business virtually impossible, which allows the great big corporations to thrive, and any mom and pop stores, they make it impossible to be able to follow through. And then when they did the $15 an hour, thing, for minimum wage. It's like a lot of these smaller businesses can't afford that. And then when you're killed by the taxes and over-regulation, not just regulation, but over-regulation, that's what causes businesses to collapse. And it's a domino effect on what happens with more and more businesses. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. They are weakening we, the people, from being able to survive on our own and thrive.
The problem that, and God bless liberals, Democrats, I get it. You're coming from the heart. You feel the government should be protecting everybody and taking care of us and having compassion. Problem is you're asking people who have no ethics to do this. Mm-hmm. Politicians are there to create systems that create money for the government, generate revenue, and also take care of their friends. California
do not live in the situation that they are going to invite you to
They never live in the situation they want you to live in. And so when you look at California is incredibly disparate because you have people who live in the north who are loving it and don't understand why everybody's complaining about California. And then you have people living in squalor, ghettos. They can't get ahead. And it's because there are two big industries in California that have caused the cost of living to go through the roof. And that is Silicon Valley and the movie industry.
Did you hear the latest thing that they're doing now?
No, what?
It's they're building basically bunks that will be your apartment.
Oh yeah, I've heard of these boxes
stacked on top of each other. Kind of looks like what was it? In World War II,
bunk. Yeah, well, I know what you mean.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like a little space, just big enough for your bed and maybe a little more stuff. Close to what is like $1,500 to $2,000 a month, or more than that.
You'll be charged for your existence.
Right.
That's the key.
Even the money you make goes for this that is just making you smaller and smaller and more obsolete.
Well, in closing, I'm going to talk about this one young man who believed in a utopian society. And he wanted everybody to get along and have housing and all this, living in a perfect world. So he joined a society that believed in this, and that was the Fabian Society. And their logo back then was a wolf in sheep's clothing. And they wanted to infiltrate countries in Europe and the United States and bring them down internally by creating a different dialogue that said, this is bad, this is all this. Well, as he hung out more and he loved what he listened to, his name was Eric Blair, by the way, Eric started to realize they didn't want a utopian society. They wanted a dystopian society where the state would tell you how to think and what to do and control you at every level under the disguise of elevating the worker. And so he left, disgruntled, upset. Now, he is a socialist, but he decided to write a series of books under the pen name George Orwell. And he wrote 1984 to warn us. And he wrote, a bunch of other books that was warning us of the plan to go into the 21st century. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't think we're on the road to 1984, guess what? It all sounds wonderful when they want to take care of you, doesn't it?
Well, if you read the book that I told you about that has to do with rules for radicals, you read that. It hasn't changed. This is what they've been
No, it hasn't.
Forever. People came over from Europe to get away from this type of thing. You couldn't own your own land and you were taxed to oblivion. And it was just...
Under socialism, you can't own a house. Just thought you should know that. Now, in closing, I just want to, by the way, I am blown away that the Black community and the Latino community have awakened to this nonsense. And Candace Owens is leading the charge. God bless her. I have always wanted to explain this. I mean, most of my friends are from mixed, all backgrounds. And we talk about this, and most of them are conservative. Well, I went to a Trump rally the other night, and it's a great representation of America there, but no one wants to cover this. No one wants to talk that there's a movement called the Blexit movement, which is the black community exiting the Democratic Party after all these centuries, 2 centuries, I believe it is, or a century and a half, finally standing up and saying, hey, I can stand on my own. And I love that this is happening, but the media is always saying, Brandon, who left, what's his name? Brandon Straka, who started the walkaway movement. They say thousands of people are walking away. No, millions are walking away. They're underreporting this once again. People are so disgruntled with the violence and the nasty tactics that they are leaving. And they're leaving in droves. And this is the Great Awakening. And I have to thank Linda Forsythe and the CVine News Network for being on the show today. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you so much. If you want to volunteer to be a digital soldier, one of our White Hats, working together as a team, we need you. I
would love that. Yes. And we'll leave all the show notes so everybody knows what's going on. Thank you so much. Thank you, Linda. Take care now.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success will be because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.